Few ideas have reshaped our understanding of life as profoundly as Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. A curious young naturalist, Darwin embarked on a voyage that would challenge centuries of belief and redefine science. From the Galapagos Islands to the halls of academia, his discoveries ignited controversy, fascination, and revolution. This is the story of the man who changed the way we see the living world forever. On February 12, 1809, in the quiet market town of Shrewsbury, England, Charles Robert Darwin was born into a family of affluence and intellect. His father, Dr. Robert Darwin, was a wealthy physician, and his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a respected naturalist and philosopher. From an early age, Charles was surrounded by discussions of science, medicine, and the natural world, though his father initially envisioned a medical career for him. As a child, Darwin exhibited an innate curiosity about nature. He collected insects, studied birds, and delighted in outdoor exploration. His fascination with the natural world was encouraged by his mother, Susanna, though her death when he was just 8 years old left a profound mark on him. Sent to the prestigious Shrewsbury School, Darwin struggled with the rigid classical education that emphasized Latin and Greek over science and natural observation. He found the memorization of texts tedious and uninspiring, preferring to spend his time outdoors, collecting beetles and conducting small experiments. Despite his early struggles in formal education, Darwin's keen observational skills and love for discovery hinted at a future beyond conventional academic paths. His father, disappointed with his son's apparent lack of academic seriousness, decided that Charles would follow in his footsteps as a physician. In 1825, at the age of 16, Darwin was sent to the University of Edinburgh to study medicine. Unbeknownst to his father, however, Charles had little interest in medicine. The sight of surgery performed without anesthesia horrified him, and he found the lectures dull. Instead, he gravitated towards the company of naturalists and geologists, attending informal scientific gatherings and collecting marine specimens. This early exposure to scientific thought and empirical investigation planted the first seeds of what would become a revolutionary career in biology. In 1827, after 2 unremarkable years at the University of Edinburgh, Charles Darwin abandoned his medical studies. Recognizing his son's disinterest in becoming a physician, Robert Darwin redirected Charles toward a more respectable profession, clergy. With this new goal in mind, Darwin enrolled at Christ's College, Cambridge, to study theology. His father believed that a quiet life as a country parson would suit his son, allowing him to pursue his interests while maintaining a stable career. Despite his theological studies, Darwin's passion for natural history flourished at Cambridge. He was deeply influenced by Reverend John Stevens Henslow, a respected botanist and professor who recognized Darwin's keen observational skills. Under Henslow's mentorship, Darwin honed his scientific curiosity, attending field excursions and learning rigorous methods of classification and collection. His association with Henslow became so well known that fellow students referred to Darwin as the man who walks with Henslow. During this period, Darwin also developed an interest in geology, inspired by Adam Sedgwick, another influential professor. Sedgwick took Darwin on a field expedition to Wales in 1831, where he learned firsthand how to conduct geological surveys and record observations meticulously. This hands-on training deepened his appreciation for the natural world, reinforcing his growing realization that science, rather than theology, was his true calling. Though he completed his theological studies and graduated in 1831, Darwin had no desire to enter the clergy. By chance, an opportunity arose that would change the course of his life. Henslow recommended Darwin for a position as a naturalist aboard HMS Beagle, a Royal Navy survey vessel set to embark on a voyage to chart the South American coastline. It was a journey that would not only shape Darwin's future, but also revolutionize the understanding of life on Earth. In December 1831, at the age of 22, Charles Darwin set sail aboard HMS Beagle, embarking on what would become a 5-year voyage around the world. Initially, his father had opposed the journey, considering it a distraction from a stable career. However, Darwin's uncle, Josiah Wedgwood, intervened, persuading Robert Darwin to allow his son to seize this extraordinary opportunity. As the Beagle navigated the Atlantic, stopping at the Cape Verde Islands before reaching South America, Darwin faced his first real scientific challenges. He struggled with severe seasickness, which plagued him throughout the journey, yet his determination never wavered. Arriving in Brazil, he was captivated by the lush rainforests, meticulously documenting the region's biodiversity. However, he also witnessed the horrors of slavery, an experience that deeply disturbed him and reinforced his opposition to the practice. One of Darwin's most transformative experiences occurred in Patagonia, where he studied rock formations and fossilized remains of extinct mammals. He unearthed the bones of giant creatures such as the Megatherium, an extinct giant ground sloth. These discoveries raised profound questions. Why had these species vanished? Could living creatures be connected to their ancient predecessors? Though he did not yet have answers, the seeds of evolutionary thought were beginning to take root in his mind. In the Andes, Darwin encountered marine fossils embedded in high-altitude rock formations, supporting the theory of geological uplift, proposed by Charles Lyell, whose book Principles of Geology he had studied during the voyage. These findings convinced him that the Earth was far older than previously believed, challenging conventional biblical interpretations of creation. As the Beagle continued its journey, Darwin's observations became increasingly detailed, shaping ideas that would later challenge the scientific and religious establishment. Unbeknownst to him, he was gathering evidence that would forever change humanity's understanding of life itself. As HMS Beagle reached the Galapagos Islands in 1835, Charles Darwin encountered one of the most pivotal experiences of his scientific journey. The isolated archipelago, with its unique species and striking variations from island to island, ignited questions that would later revolutionize biology. He meticulously observed giant tortoises, noting how their shell shapes varied depending on their island of origin. Local inhabitants claimed they could determine a tortoise's home island just by looking at its shell. Even more intriguing were the finches. Although Darwin did not immediately recognize their significance, he collected specimens of the birds, noticing subtle differences in their beak shapes. These variations seemed to correspond to the type of food available on each island. Initially, he assumed they were unrelated species, but upon returning to England, ornithologists confirmed that they were, in fact, all finches, closely related yet uniquely adapted to their specific environments. Darwin's meticulous note-taking and specimen collection extended beyond the Galapagos. In Argentina, he discovered fossilized remains of extinct mammals that bore striking similarities to modern species. In Tierra del Fuego, he encountered indigenous peoples whose way of life starkly contrasted with European civilization, prompting him to reflect on the nature of human evolution and societal development. By the time the Beagle returned to England in 1836, Darwin had amassed an extraordinary collection of specimens and observations. He was no longer an aspiring theologian, but a dedicated naturalist, driven by the mysteries of species variation. His notebooks brimmed with ideas, though he was not yet ready to present a theory of evolution. Instead, he focused on organizing his findings, collaborating with leading scientists, and establishing himself within the scientific community. His observations had planted the seeds of a revolutionary idea, one that, once fully realized, would challenge the very foundations of biology and religious thought. Upon returning to England in 1836, Charles Darwin faced the daunting task of analyzing the vast collection of specimens and observations he had gathered during the Beagle voyage. He quickly immersed himself in scientific circles, collaborating with leading experts such as geologist Charles Lyell and ornithologist John Gould. Gould's analysis of Darwin's Galapagos finches revealed that they were indeed closely related species, each uniquely adapted to its island's environment. This discovery was a crucial turning point in Darwin's understanding of species variation. As he worked through his findings, Darwin began formulating the idea that species were not fixed, as commonly believed, but rather changed over time. Influenced by Lyell's work on gradual geological change and Thomas Malthus's essay on population growth, Darwin realized that in nature, organisms must compete for limited resources. Those with advantageous traits would survive and reproduce, while less adapted individuals would perish, a process he would later call natural selection. Despite the revolutionary nature of his ideas, Darwin hesitated to publish them. He recognized the profound implications of suggesting that life evolved through natural processes rather than divine creation. Instead, he devoted years to refining his theory and gathering further evidence, using selective breeding in pigeons to illustrate how small variations could accumulate over generations. In 1842, Darwin drafted a preliminary essay outlining his theory, expanding it into a more detailed manuscript by 1844. However, fearing controversy, he shared it only with a few trusted colleagues. For nearly 2 decades, he kept his most radical conclusions unpublished, continuing his research while building a solid foundation of evidence. The breakthrough came in 1858, when he received a letter from naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, who had independently arrived at a theory strikingly similar to Darwin's. Faced with the prospect of losing priority, Darwin finally prepared to share his groundbreaking ideas with the world. In 1859, after years of meticulous research and hesitation, Charles Darwin finally published On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. The book, a culmination of over 2 decades of study, presented a compelling argument that species evolve through a process of natural selection, driven by environmental pressures and competition for survival. The impact was immediate and profound. The first edition sold out on the day of its release, and discussions erupted across scientific, religious, and public circles. Many naturalists embraced Darwin's evidence-based approach, recognizing the power of his argument. However, others reacted with skepticism or outright hostility, as his theory challenged the prevailing belief in divine creation and the fixed nature of species. One of the most famous public debates took place in 1860 at Oxford, where Darwin's ally, Thomas Henry Huxley, defended the theory against fierce opposition from figures like Bishop Samuel Wilberforce. Huxley, later nicknamed Darwin's Bulldog, passionately argued in favor of evolution, helping to solidify Darwin's ideas in the scientific community. Despite the controversy, Darwin continued his research, expanding on his theories in subsequent works. The Variation of Animals and Plants Under Domestication, 1868, and The Descent of Man, 1871, extended his ideas to human evolution, proposing that humans shared a common ancestor with other primates. This assertion provoked even greater public debate, as it directly challenged the idea of human exceptionalism. Throughout the 1860s and 1870s, Darwin's reputation grew. He was honored by various scientific institutions, though some, fearing backlash, hesitated to fully endorse his work. Despite chronic illness, Darwin remained dedicated to his studies, further refining his theories on evolution, botany, and heredity. By the later years of his life, On the Origin of Species had already begun reshaping biology, though not universally accepted. Darwin's work had irreversibly altered the course of scientific thought, laying the foundation for modern evolutionary biology. Despite the growing acceptance of his ideas, Charles Darwin faced significant resistance from various quarters. Religious leaders, conservative scientists, and even some members of the general public viewed his theory of evolution as a direct threat to traditional beliefs. The suggestion that all species, including humans, had evolved through natural processes rather than divine creation was seen as radical, even heretical. One of Darwin's greatest challenges was the lack of a known mechanism for heredity. While On the Origin of Species convincingly argued for evolution through natural selection, it could not explain how traits were passed from one generation to the next. Darwin proposed the idea of pangenesis, suggesting that small particles from different parts of the body contributed to heredity. However, this theory was speculative and lacked experimental support, leaving a critical gap in his evolutionary framework. Health issues also plagued Darwin throughout his life. He suffered from chronic illnesses, including severe stomach problems, headaches, and fatigue. The exact cause remains uncertain, with modern speculation ranging from Chagas disease, contracted during the Beagle voyage, to psychosomatic stress. His declining health often forced him into isolation at his home in Down House, where he continued his research in relative seclusion. While some of his contemporaries, such as Alfred Russel Wallace, fully supported Darwin's ideas, others, including prominent scientists like Richard Owen, sought to undermine his work. Owen, an influential paleontologist, publicly criticized Darwin's theory, arguing that species were divinely created rather than evolving naturally. Despite these challenges, Darwin remained steadfast, refining his ideas and addressing criticisms with additional research. His later works on human evolution and sexual selection, particularly The Descent of Man, 1871, further fueled debate but also expanded the reach of evolutionary theory. By the late 19th century, Darwin's ideas were no longer fringe science, but central to biological discourse. Though he did not live to see the discovery of genetics, which would later validate his theories, he had already transformed the way humanity understood life itself. As Charles Darwin entered the final years of his life, he continued his scientific work with unwavering dedication, despite his persistent health struggles. Though often confined to Down House due to illness, he remained intellectually active, publishing several influential books including The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, 1872, and The Power of Movement in Plants, 1880. These works further explored his evolutionary ideas, extending them beyond animals and into the realm of plant biology and human behavior. By this time, Darwin had gained widespread recognition, though his work still stirred controversy. While evolutionary theory was becoming more accepted within scientific circles, many religious groups and conservative thinkers continued to reject it. Despite the ongoing debates, Darwin himself avoided direct confrontations, preferring to let the evidence speak for itself. He left much of the public defense of his ideas to his supporters, particularly Thomas Henry Huxley, who continued to champion natural selection. In his later years, Darwin expressed a deep appreciation for the beauty and complexity of the natural world. He maintained a strong love for botany, spending much of his time studying plants and conducting experiments in his greenhouse. While he no longer considered himself religious, he was not an aggressive critic of faith, instead adopting a more agnostic stance. He once remarked that the grandeur of evolution filled him with a sense of wonder, even if it challenged traditional theological interpretations. On April 19, 1882, Charles Darwin passed away peacefully at the age of 73. His contributions to science were so profound that he was honored with burial at Westminster Abbey, alongside some of Britain's greatest figures. His journey, from a curious boy in Shrewsbury to one of the most influential scientists in history, had forever changed humanity's understanding of life on Earth. Even after his death in 1882, Charles Darwin's influence on science continued to grow, shaping the foundations of modern biology. His theory of evolution by natural selection provided a unifying explanation for the diversity of life, fundamentally altering how scientists understood the natural world. One of the most significant developments that reinforced Darwin's work came in the early 20th century with the rediscovery of Gregor Mendel's work on genetics. While Darwin had struggled to explain heredity, Mendel's experiments with plants provided a mechanism, genetic inheritance, that perfectly complemented natural selection. This fusion of Darwinian evolution with Mendelian genetics became known as the modern synthesis, solidifying evolutionary theory as a central pillar of biology. Darwin's ideas also had profound technological and medical implications. The principles of natural selection inspired advancements in fields such as antibiotics and disease research, where scientists observed how bacteria evolved resistance to treatments. Evolutionary theory also guided developments in agriculture, improving crop breeding techniques through artificial selection, much like Darwin had studied with pigeons. Beyond biology, Darwin's impact extended into philosophy, psychology, and anthropology. His work challenged long-held views on human exceptionalism, influencing thinkers who sought to understand the evolution of behavior, emotions, and social structures. Sigmund Freud, for example, integrated evolutionary ideas into his theories of the human mind, while anthropologists used Darwinian principles to explore the origins of human culture and civilization. Darwin's legacy is also evident in modern debates over science and religion. While his work initially faced strong opposition from religious institutions, it eventually led to deeper discussions about the relationship between faith and scientific inquiry. Today, the theory of evolution remains a cornerstone of biological science, continuously refined and supported by new discoveries in genetics, paleontology, and molecular biology. From the Galapagos finches to the depths of the human genome, Darwin's ideas continue to shape scientific progress, proving that his vision of life's interconnectedness was one of the most groundbreaking insights in history. More than a century after his death, Charles Darwin's ideas remain at the core of modern biology. His theory of evolution by natural selection has been extensively validated and expanded by discoveries in genetics, molecular biology, and paleontology. Advances in DNA sequencing have confirmed the common ancestry of species, tracing evolutionary lineages with unprecedented precision. The fossil record, once incomplete, has yielded transitional forms that further support Darwin's framework, solidifying his place as one of history's most influential scientists. Beyond pure science, Darwin's ideas continue to shape discussions on medicine, ecology, and conservation. In medicine, understanding evolutionary adaptations in viruses and bacteria has been crucial in combating antibiotic resistance and developing vaccines. In ecology, Darwin's insights help scientists predict how species will respond to climate change, guiding conservation efforts to protect biodiversity. Evolutionary principles also inform studies on human health, from the genetic basis of diseases to the impact of natural selection on modern populations. Darwin's influence extends beyond the laboratory. His work reshaped philosophy, ethics, and even social policy, challenging traditional views on human origins and our place in the natural world. While some misinterpretations of his theories, such as social Darwinism, led to harmful ideologies, modern evolutionary science has distanced itself from such distortions, emphasizing cooperation, adaptation, and complexity in natural systems. Despite continued resistance from some religious groups, evolution is now a fundamental concept taught worldwide, influencing how society understands science and progress. Darwin's vision of life as a dynamic, ever-changing process remains more relevant than ever, providing insights into emerging fields like artificial intelligence, evolutionary computing, and synthetic biology. Charles Darwin's journey, from a curious young naturalist to the father of evolutionary biology, transformed human understanding of life itself. His legacy endures, not only in textbooks and scientific research, but in the ongoing quest to understand the origins and future of life on Earth.